A blind old woman, alone at the bus stop, soaked in the pouring rain, trembling, begging every time footsteps passed. 46 people walked past her. No one stopped. No one looked at her. Everyone ignored her. Then a girl stopped. A young black girl, poor, exhausted, working 2 jobs, with a little brother at home waiting for dinner. She had every reason to continue, but she didn't.
Ma'am? Are you all right?
I need help, please. I've been here too long.
Whitney Ingram gave the stranger her only coat, took her home, and gave her the last meal she and her brother would have that night. No reward, no recognition, only kindness. But then the next morning, a limousine stopped in front of her house. What had happened? Most people would have buckled under what Whitney carried every day. But she had a reason to keep standing, and he was 11 years old. 4:45 a.m. The alarm buzzed from a phone with a cracked scream. Whitney reached for it in the dark, turned it off before the second ring. She never let it ring twice. Calvin was sleeping in the next room, and that boy needed every minute he could get. She sat up on the couch. Not a bed, the couch. She gave Calvin the only bedroom the day their mother's hospital bed was taken away. That was 2 years ago. She'd been sleeping on these cushions ever since. The apartment was small. 1 bedroom. A kitchen that was really just a corner with a stove. A bathroom where the faucet dripped no matter how hard you turned it. The radiator clanked every 20 minutes like a tired heartbeat. Loud enough to hear, not strong enough to heat anything. Whitney folded her blanket. Precise, neat, corners tucked. It was a small thing, but it was hers. One small act of order in a life that had very little of it. She checked on Calvin. He was asleep on his stomach, mouth open. A science textbook was still spread across the pillow next to his head. Marine biology. He'd been reading the same library book for 3 weeks. Not because he was slow, but because the library didn't have anything else for him. His sneakers sat by the bed. White once, gray now. Duct tape wrapped around the left sole where the rubber had split open. Whitney pulled his blanket up. She looked at the framed photo on his nightstand. Their mother, smiling, wearing a yellow dress Whitney still kept in the closet. She whispered to the photo. Not a prayer, more like a daily report. We're still here, Mama. The walk to work took 19 minutes. She passed the bodega on the corner. Mr. Ellis was already sweeping the sidewalk. He waved. She waved back. Every morning, same rhythm, same silence, same respect. She passed the mural on Clifton Street, half faded now, a painted sun with children's handprints around it. Someone had sprayed something ugly over part of it last month. Nobody cleaned it up. She passed the bus stop on Ridgeline Avenue, the same bus stop she'd pass again tonight. And across the street, a tall glass building, sleek, modern, completely out of place in this neighborhood. Whitney didn't look at it. She'd never looked at it. That building wasn't her world. It never had been. She kept walking. Sunnyside Diner opened at 6. Hank Davis, the owner, was already behind the counter when Whitney came through the back door. Hank was 61, thick hands, gray stubble, voice like gravel. He'd owned this place for 30 years. It used to be the busiest spot on the block. Now it was barely surviving. The kitchen was held together with duct tape and Hank's stubbornness. The fryer needed replacing. 2 burners worked out of 4. The walk-in cooler made a sound that wasn't normal, but Whitney didn't complain. She tied her apron, pulled her hair back, and got to work. She was fast, efficient, quiet. She remembered every order without writing it down. She plated food like it mattered, because to her, it did. And when old Mr. Patterson came in on Tuesdays and only ordered coffee, Whitney always slipped an extra piece of toast onto his table when Hank wasn't looking. That was who she was. Kindness wasn't a performance for Whitney. It was a habit. But what nobody at the diner knew, what Whitney didn't talk about, was the letter pinned to her fridge. 8 months ago, she applied to the Ridgeview Culinary Institute. She got accepted. Partial scholarship. But partial still left a gap of $4,800. She might as well have owed $1 million. The acceptance letter was pinned to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a sunflower. Calvin saw it every morning. He asked once, "When do you start, Whit?" She said, "Soon." That was the answer she gave when something wasn't going to happen. After school, Calvin went to the community center on Oak Street. Pastor Raymond Brooks ran a free tutoring program there, 3 days a week, open to any kid in the neighborhood. Calvin was the kid who stayed after everyone else left. He'd sit in the corner, rereading that same marine biology book, drawing sketches of coral reefs in a notebook with a broken spine. His science teacher told Whitney he should apply for a gifted program across town. The application fee was $85. Whitney had the number circled on a sticky note on her bathroom mirror. She looked at it every morning while brushing her teeth. She hadn't crossed it off. She hadn't paid it either. At night, after Calvin fell asleep, Whitney sat on the couch in the dark. She counted coins on the counter. She stretched a box of pasta across 3 dinners. She told Calvin she already ate at the diner. She didn't. When Miss Lorraine, the elderly neighbor who watched Calvin during night shifts, asked how she was doing, Whitney always smiled. "We're good, Miss Lorraine. We're good." But alone, in the silence, she pressed her palms against her eyes and just breathed. Long and slow. Not crying, just carrying the weight for one more day. Whitney Ingram didn't feel sorry for herself. She wasn't waiting for rescue. She simply did the next thing, and the next, and the next. But what she didn't know was that tonight, on the worst shift of her week, something would happen at a bus stop on Ridgeline Avenue that would change the course of her entire life. What Whitney didn't know was that the woman at the bus stop had been sitting there for almost 2 hours, and not a single person had stopped. Whitney's diner shift ended at 6:45 p.m. She had 90 minutes before she had to clock in at the grocery store for overnight stocking. 90 minutes to get home, check on Calvin, maybe eat something, maybe sit down for 5 minutes before the next shift started. That was the plan. The rain killed it. Not a drizzle, not a sprinkle, a downpour. Cold, slanting, the kind that hits your skin like needles and soaks through a jacket in 30 seconds. The sky went from gray to black in minutes. Wind picked up. Temperature dropped. Whitney didn't have an umbrella. She never carried one. Couldn't justify spending the money on something she might lose on the bus. She ducked under the awning of a closed shoe repair shop. Water was already running down her neck. Her shoes were soaked. She calculated, if she ran, she could make it home in 12 minutes. Calvin was with Miss Lorraine. She could handle 12 minutes. She stepped back into the rain and started moving. That's when she heard it. "Hello? Is someone there?" A thin voice, barely cutting through the sound of the downpour, coming from the bus stop on Ridgeline Avenue, the same one she passed every single day. Whitney almost didn't stop. Almost. She was already late, already cold, already running the math in her head. 90 minutes, 12 to get home, 8 to change, 20 to walk to the grocery store. Every second mattered. But something in that voice pulled her. She turned, and she saw her, an older white woman, sitting on the bench, alone. No umbrella, no coat thick enough for this weather. Her white hair was plastered flat to her face. Her clothes were drenched, completely, totally drenched, like she'd been sitting in this rain for a very long time. She was gripping a thin, white folding cane across her lap with both hands. Her fingers were trembling, not just from cold. She was blind, and she was terrified. "Please," the woman called again, her voice cracked. Is anybody there? I can hear footsteps. Please. I know someone is there. Whitney looked around. The street wasn't empty. A man in a raincoat hurried past on the opposite sidewalk. He glanced over, kept walking. A couple with an umbrella big enough for 3 people crossed to the other side of the street to avoid getting close. A woman on her phone actually stepped around the old woman's cane without breaking her stride. Didn't even look down. Each person who passed was a small, quiet cruelty. Not dramatic, not villainous, just indifferent. The old woman's chin dropped to her chest. Her shoulders were shaking now. She whispered something Whitney couldn't hear from 20 feet away. But Whitney saw her lips move. She saw the way the woman's hands squeezed that cane, knuckles white, grip desperate, like it was the only thing keeping her connected to the world. And then the woman said it again, louder this time, louder than her pride probably wanted. Please, I don't know where I am anymore. I can't find my way. Someone, please. Her voice broke on the last word. Whitney's chest tightened. She thought about her shift. She thought about the grocery store. She thought about the write-up she'd get for being late again. She thought about how she was already shivering, and she still had an entire night of stacking shelves ahead of her. And then she stopped thinking. She just walked over. "Ma'am?" The old woman flinched, then froze, then turned her face toward Whitney's voice with an expression that almost broke Whitney in half. It was relief. Pure, raw, desperate relief. The kind of relief that only comes from someone who had given up. Oh, thank God." The woman's voice shook. I thought nobody was going to stop." "I'm here," Whitney said. Quiet, calm. "I'm right here. I can't see anything. I had a car, but I left. I was upset and I left, and now I don't know where I am, and my phone is gone, and I've been sitting here and I keep calling out, and nobody—" Her voice broke again. She pressed her lips together, hard, fighting it, trying to hold on to whatever dignity she had left. Whitney looked at this woman, soaked, shaking, alone. A blind woman stranded in a rainstorm in a neighborhood she didn't know, calling out for help to a street full of people who couldn't be bothered. And Whitney Ingram, who had 2 jobs, an empty fridge, and not a single reason to stop, made a decision. She didn't make a speech. She didn't weigh the pros and cons. She took off her jacket, her only jacket, and draped it over the woman's shoulders. "Let's get you out of this rain." Whitney didn't know it yet, but the next 45 minutes would be the most important 45 minutes of her life. The woman resisted at first. Of course she did. "No, dear, no, you'll freeze. Take your jacket back." "Ma'am, you're shaking. We're way past that." "But you must be cold too. I can hear your teeth." "I'm fine." She wasn't fine. The rain was cutting through her t-shirt like it wasn't even there. But Whitney didn't care. Not right now. Not with this woman sitting in front of her, looking like she'd been forgotten by the entire world. She looked at the bus schedule taped to the post beside the bench. The last bus on this route left 40 minutes ago. No bus was coming. Not tonight. This woman had been sitting here, waiting for something that was never going to arrive. "Ma'am, is there someone I can call? Family? A friend?" Silence. Then, quiet, almost embarrassed. "I seem to have left my phone in a car I was no longer in." The way she said it, dry, precise, measured, like someone used to choosing her words carefully, even now, even drenched and trembling in a rainstorm. Something about the way this woman spoke didn't match someone helpless on a bench, Something didn't quite fit. But that wasn't the problem right now. The problem was that this woman was blind, alone, soaking wet, and had nowhere to go. "Okay," Whitney said. "Can I walk you somewhere? A coffee shop maybe, or—" She looked up the street. Nothing open. Not on this block. Not past 8 p.m. The shoe repair shop was closed. The laundromat had its gate down. Even the bodega had shut early because of the storm. There was only one dry, warm place Whitney knew within walking distance. Home. She hesitated. For exactly 1 second. 1 second where every practical thought in her head screamed, "Your shift, your brother, your time, you don't have anything to give." 1 second. Then she made the decision. "Ma'am, I live a few blocks from here. It's warm, it's dry. I can call someone for you from there." The woman turned her face toward Whitney. Those unfocused eyes, looking at nothing and everything at the same time. "You'd bring me to your home?" "Yes, ma'am." "You don't know me." "You don't know me either, so I guess we're even." A pause. The rain hammered around them. And then something happened on the old woman's face. A flicker. Like surprise, but deeper. Like she was studying Whitney through sound alone and filing this moment away somewhere important. "All right," the woman said softly. "All right." Whitney offered her arm. The woman took it, shaky but deliberate, trusting. They walked. "Puddle on the left, step right. Curb coming, big one, step down. Crack in the sidewalk, stay close to me." The woman followed Whitney's voice like a compass. Two strangers. 5 minutes ago, they were nothing to each other. But in this rain, they moved like a unit. "You have steady hands," the woman said quietly. "I'm a cook. Steady hands are part of the job." "A cook," the woman repeated it, not like a question, like she was taking notes. They reached Whitney's building, 3 flights, no elevator. "I'm sorry about the stairs," Whitney said. The woman let out a sound, half sigh, half laugh, a real one. "I've climbed worse." Step by step, flight by flight, Whitney called out every landing, every turn. The woman didn't complain once. Her breathing was heavy by the 3rd floor, but she kept going, jaw set, chin up. There was a stubbornness in her that Whitney recognized, because she had it too. Whitney unlocked the door. Calvin was at the kitchen table doing homework. He looked up and saw his sister, soaking wet, without a jacket, guiding a trembling, drenched, elderly white woman through the front door. His eyes went wide. "Cal, this is—" Whitney paused. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I didn't get your name." "Eleanor." "This is Eleanor. She got caught in the rain. We're going to help her dry off." Calvin didn't hesitate, didn't ask questions. He got up, went to the bathroom, came back with the only clean towel they had. "Here you go, ma'am." Eleanor took it, and her face did that thing again, that flicker, like she'd stopped expecting kindness from anyone tonight. "Thank you, sweetheart," she said quietly. "Thank you." Whitney hung Eleanor's wet coat by the radiator. As she lifted it, something caught her eye. A small pin on the lapel. Silver, shaped like a mountain peak with a single line through it. Heavier than it looked. Real silver, maybe, Whitney thought. "That's pretty," and turned away. She didn't think about it again. Not yet. Now came the hard part. Whitney opened the fridge. She already knew what was inside. Half a container of leftover rice, a few slices of bread, and a small pot of soup she'd made from whatever vegetables were about to turn. Carrots, onion, a potato that was getting soft. That was it. That was dinner. For her and Calvin. For the entire night. She stared at the pot. She could feel the emptiness in her own stomach. She hadn't eaten since the leftover toast at the diner that morning. She thought about Calvin. She thought about the long night ahead. Then she looked at Eleanor, sitting at her kitchen table, wrapped in a towel, hands still trembling, chin still up, still holding on to her composure like a woman who refused to fall apart in front of strangers. Whitney took the pot out, heated the soup, plated the rice, set everything in front of Eleanor. "Have you eaten, dear?" Eleanor asked. "I ate at work," Whitney said. Smooth, natural. She'd told that lie so many times, it barely felt like lying anymore. Calvin looked at his sister from across the table. He knew. He always knew. He saw the empty fridge. He saw the empty stove. He said nothing. Eleanor ate slowly, carefully. She paused after the first spoonful of soup, set the spoon down. "This is good," she said. "Really good. You made this?" "Yeah, just stuff I threw together." Eleanor picked up the spoon again. She ate every last spoonful, every grain of rice. She set the spoon down gently, folded her hands, and was quiet for a long moment. "Whoever taught you to cook," Eleanor said, "loved you very much." Whitney's throat tightened. She turned toward the sink so Eleanor wouldn't hear the catch in her voice, gripped the edge of the counter, breathed. "Yeah," she whispered. "She did." Calvin watched his sister from the table. He looked at the empty pot. He looked at the fridge he knew had nothing left in it. Then he looked back down at his textbook and didn't say a word. That boy understood more at 11 than most people understand at 40. Eleanor reached into her pocket and offered Whitney something. And what Whitney did next told Eleanor everything she needed to know. The rain stopped around 10. The apartment was quiet. Calvin had fallen asleep at the kitchen table, head resting on his textbook, pencil still in his hand. Whitney gently pulled the book out from under him, marked the page, and draped a blanket over his shoulders. Eleanor sat still at the table, listening. Not just to the sounds of the apartment, the radiator clanking, the faucet dripping, a neighbor's TV murmuring through the wall, but to Whitney, the way she moved around this small space, the way she took care of her brother without making a sound, the way she handled everything with quiet, practiced grace. Then Eleanor reached into her pocket. She pulled out a fold of cash. She held it out, not blindly, not fumbling, but precisely in Whitney's direction, as if she could sense exactly where Whitney was standing. "For your trouble," Eleanor said. "Please." Whitney looked at the bills. Her heart dropped. Hundreds, several of them. More money than she'd seen in one place in months, maybe longer. Her mind went everywhere at once. The culinary school tuition, Calvin's application fee, the electric bill that was 2 weeks overdue, the empty fridge, the duct tape sneakers. She needed that money. She needed it desperately. She gently pushed Eleanor's hand back. "No, ma'am, I didn't help you for money." She said it simply, not with saintly grandeur, not with drama, just the quiet, matter-of-fact tone of a woman whose mother raised her a certain way. Eleanor didn't pull her hand back right away. She held it there for a moment. Then she lowered it slowly, folded the bills back into her pocket. And then she said something that Whitney wouldn't understand until tomorrow. "I won't forget a debt." Not thank you, not you're so kind. I won't forget a debt. The words were too precise, too deliberate, too heavy for a stranger sitting at a kitchen table in a borrowed towel. But Whitney let it pass. "Ma'am, is there someone I can call to come get you?" Eleanor recited a phone number from memory. No hesitation. 10 digits, rattled off like a woman used to giving instructions. Whitney dialed on her cracked phone. It rang once. A man's voice answered, sharp, urgent, almost frantic. Mrs. Moore? Is that? Hi, Whitney said. I'm calling for Eleanor. She's at my apartment. She's safe. The voice on the other end exhaled, long, heavy, like a man who hadn't breathed properly in hours. I'll be there in 15 minutes, please. Don't let her leave. Exactly 14 minutes later, a knock at the door. Whitney opened it. A tall man in a dark suit. Composed, controlled. But his eyes told a different story. Relief, worry, exhaustion. And on his tie clip, a small silver crest. A mountain peak with a single line through it. The same symbol as Eleanor's brooch. Whitney noticed it, a small ping of recognition somewhere in the back of her mind. But she dismissed it. People wore pins. It didn't mean anything. The man looked past Whitney into the apartment. He took it in quickly. The small space, the sleeping child, the coat drying on the radiator, the empty pot on the stove. His jaw tightened. "Thank you," he said, "for taking care of her." The weight in his voice told Whitney something. This woman, Eleanor, was someone to this man, not just a client. Something more. At the door, Eleanor took Whitney's hand. Her grip was firm, surprisingly strong. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Whitney. Whitney Ingram." Eleanor repeated it, slowly, quietly, like she was pressing each syllable into her memory. "Whitney." A pause. "Remember that you did this, even if no one else does." And then she was gone. After the door closed, Whitney stood still for a moment. Then she noticed something on the kitchen table. A business card, small, heavy cardstock, embossed. She picked it up. The print was subtle, hard to read in the dim light, but she could make out the crest, that same mountain. She put it on the fridge with the sunflower magnet, right next to the culinary school acceptance letter. She was too tired to think about what any of it meant. While Whitney was falling asleep on her couch that night, 3 phone calls were being made across the city, all about her. Whitney lay in the dark, the blanket pulled up to her chin, eyes on the ceiling. Something nagged at her. She couldn't name it, couldn't shape it into a thought, just a feeling, like she'd missed something obvious, something right in front of her face. Eleanor's voice. The way she spoke, calm, measured, even when she was soaked and shaking. The way she said, "I won't forget a debt," like it was a contract, not a thank you. The way Gerald, the man in the suit, had answered the phone. Not hello, not who is this? He said, "Mrs. Moore," like he'd been waiting, like he'd been searching. And that pin, that silver mountain crest, on Eleanor's coat, on Gerald's tie clip, the same symbol, twice. Whitney turned on her side, closed her eyes. The thought was almost there, almost forming, but exhaustion pulled her under before it could take shape. She fell asleep. But across the city, Eleanor Moore was wide awake. She sat in the back seat of a black SUV. Gerald drove in silence. The city lights slid across the windows. Eleanor hadn't spoken since they left Whitney's apartment. Her hands were folded in her lap, still, composed. But her mind was working. Then she spoke. "Gerald?" "Yes, ma'am." "I need you to find out everything about that young woman, where she works, what she's studying, who her family is." Gerald glanced in the rearview mirror. He wasn't surprised. He'd worked for Eleanor Moore for 18 years. He knew the tone. This wasn't curiosity. This was a decision already being made. "Yes, ma'am." Eleanor was quiet for another moment. Then, softer now, almost to herself. "She fed me, Gerald. She had almost nothing in that kitchen, and she fed me her dinner. Her little boy sat right there and watched her do it. He didn't say a word. Silence. Find out what she needs. That night, 3 calls went out. The first, Eleanor to her personal assistant. A background search on Whitney Ingram. Employment, education, family history, everything. The second, Eleanor to the director of the Crestview Capital Foundation. A question about culinary arts scholarships, small business grants, youth education funds. Have options on my desk by 8 a.m. The third, Gerald, to a number he rarely dialed. He said only 6 words. She wants the full treatment. Morning. At 4:45 a.m., Whitney's alarm buzzed. She got up, folded the blanket, started the routine. Same as every morning. Same as always. She had no idea what was coming. Outside her window, the tall glass building on Ridgeline Avenue caught the first light of dawn. She'd walked past it 1,000 times. Today, she would learn its name. At 8:15 that morning, a limousine longer than Whitney's apartment pulled up to her building, and the man who stepped out was looking for her by name. Whitney was already dressed, bag on her shoulder, keys in her hand, running late for the diner. She pulled the front door open and almost walked straight into Gerald Turner. Fresh suit, clean shave, that silver mountain crest on his tie clip catching the hallway light. Whitney froze. "Mr. Turner? Is Eleanor okay?" Gerald smiled. Not a big smile, a careful one. The kind that said, "You have no idea what's about to happen." "She's more than okay, Miss Ingram. She'd like to see you this morning, if you're willing." "I have work in 20 minutes. Mrs. Moore asked me to assure you that your employer has been contacted. You're covered for today." Whitney stared at him. "How did she?" "If you'll come with me, everything will make sense shortly." Whitney didn't move. Every instinct said this is not normal. A stranger knew where she worked, had called her boss, and was standing in her hallway, inviting her into a car. But then she thought about Eleanor, the trembling hands, the quiet dignity, the way she said, "I won't forget a debt." "Give me 1 minute." She went back inside. Calvin was eating dry cereal at the table. No milk, because the milk ran out 2 days ago. Who was at the door? "That man from last night. Eleanor wants to see me." Calvin put his spoon down, walked to the window, looked out. His jaw dropped. "Whit, there's a limo outside." Whitney came to the window. A black limousine, gleaming, impossibly long, parked in front of their building. On the door, in polished silver, the mountain crest. The same crest from Eleanor's brooch, from Gerald's tie clip, from the business card on the fridge. Miss Lorraine was on the sidewalk in her bathrobe, coffee mug frozen in midair. Kids on bikes had stopped in the middle of the street. Mr. Ellis stood outside the bodega, mouth open. A limousine on this block was like a spaceship landing. Calvin turned to Whitney, eyes the size of dinner plates. "Are we being kidnapped by rich people?" Whitney almost laughed. Almost. "Get your backpack, you're coming with me." The ride was silent. Whitney sat rigid, hands flat on her knees, completely out of her element. Calvin found a bottle of water in the console fridge, looked at Whitney for permission, and took it like he was handling a museum artifact. Gerald drove, calm, unhurried. He didn't explain anything. Then the car turned onto Ridgeline Avenue. Whitney's stomach dropped. The limousine pulled up to the tall glass building, the one she walked past every single day, the one she'd never looked at, never had a reason to. It existed in her peripheral vision like a wall, like a border between her world and some other world she'd never be part of. She looked up now. Silver letters above the entrance. Clean, sharp, unmistakable. Crestview Capital. And below the name, the crest, the mountain. The same symbol she'd seen 3 times in 12 hours and dismissed every single time. Her breath caught. "Mr. Turner, what is this?" "This is where Mrs. Moore works, Ms. Ingram." The lobby was glass and marble. People in suits. Security guards in blazers. Every surface polished. Every sound hushed. Whitney was in her diner work shoes, faded jeans, a borrowed jacket from the grocery store lost and found, because she gave her only one to Eleanor last night. Calvin held her hand, not because he was scared, because he knew she was. Elevator, top floor, doors opened, a long conference room, floor-to-ceiling windows, and at the head of the table, Eleanor Moore. She was not the shivering woman from the bus stop. Tailored navy suit, silver jewelry, the crest brooch, polished, prominent, on her lapel. White hair swept back, posture straight. She looked like exactly what she was, the founder, chairwoman, and controlling shareholder of Crestview Capital. A firm managing $2.4 billion across real estate, venture capital, and philanthropic foundations, built from nothing over 45 years. She lost her sight 6 years ago. She never slowed down. Eleanor stood when Whitney entered. She didn't need to see to know exactly where Whitney was. "Sit down, Whitney, please." Whitney didn't sit, not yet. She was staring at the windows behind Eleanor. Because through that glass across the street, she could see it. Her apartment building, the crumbling walls, the patched window on the 3rd floor, the fire escape where she sat on summer nights because the apartment was too hot. She could see her own life, small and struggling, from Eleanor's window. She'd walked past this building every day for 3 years. Eleanor's office had been looking down at her world the entire time. "Last night," Eleanor said, "I did something reckless. I dismissed my driver after a disagreement and tried to make my way home alone. Pride, stubbornness, whatever you want to call it. I ended up at a bus stop in the rain for 2 hours. 46 people walked past me. I counted their footsteps. Every single one. 46. She paused. You were number 46, and you were the only one who stopped. What Eleanor offered Whitney next wasn't charity. It was something Whitney had never been given before, a chance. Eleanor let the silence sit for a moment. She could feel Whitney standing there, could feel the weight of it, the shock, the confusion, the overwhelm. She gave it room. Then she spoke. "You gave me your jacket. You wrapped my hands in a napkin from your diner. You guided me through the rain, up 3 flights of stairs, into your home. You sat me at your table and fed me the only meal you had, the meal meant for you and your brother." She paused. "And when I offered you money, money I know you needed, you said no." Another pause, longer this time. "Do you know how rare that is, Whitney?" Whitney didn't answer. She couldn't. Her throat was locked. Eleanor continued. Her voice wasn't soft anymore. It was steady, clear, the voice of a woman who had built an empire with words and decisions. "I've spent 45 years in this business. I've met thousands of people, CEOs, politicians, billionaires, people who smile at you and calculate what you're worth before you finish your sentence. I've sat across from people who would step over a dying man to get to a deal." She folded her hands on the table. "And last night, a 27-year-old cook with an empty fridge gave a stranger her last bowl of soup and asked for nothing in return. Not because she wanted something, not because she knew who I was, but because that's who she is." Eleanor leaned forward slightly. Everyone invests in success, Whitney. That's easy. I invest in character. You showed me your character last night, and now I'd like to invest in you. Whitney's knees were shaking. She finally sat down. Calvin slid into the chair beside her. His hand found hers under the table. I don't understand, Whitney said quietly. I just gave you some soup. No, Eleanor said. You gave me your soup. There's a difference. Gerald stepped forward and placed a folder on the table in front of Whitney. Thick, official. The Crestview crest embossed on the cover. Open it, Eleanor said. Whitney's hands trembled as she opened the folder. The first page. A letter from the Ridgeview Culinary Institute. Not the acceptance letter she already had pinned to her fridge. A new one. Full scholarship. Complete tuition coverage. Plus a monthly living stipend so she wouldn't have to work overnight shifts while studying. Whitney read it twice. Her vision blurred on the second read. I tasted your soup last night, Eleanor said. You have a gift, Whitney, a real one. That soup was made from almost nothing, and it was one of the best things I've eaten in years. Whoever taught you to cook gave you something extraordinary. Let's make sure you get to use it. Whitney pressed her hand over her mouth. She couldn't speak. Keep reading, Eleanor said. Second page. A seed grant from the Crestview Capital Foundation. $120,000. Not a loan, a grant. For Whitney to open her own restaurant or food business after graduation. Crestview would provide mentorship, legal support, and accounting. Not ownership, not control. Whitney keeps 100%. I don't give handouts, Eleanor said. I give starting lines. What you do after that is up to you. Whitney shook her head slowly. Not in refusal, in disbelief. The numbers on the page didn't feel real. They didn't belong in her life. Things like this happened to other people. People on television. People in stories. Not to girls who slept on couches and stretched a box of pasta across 3 nights. There's one more thing, Eleanor said. Whitney looked up. Your brother. Calvin straightened in his chair. His eyes went wide. My team tells me Calvin is exceptional. His science teacher recommended him for a gifted program. The application fee is $85. Whitney's breath stopped. How did she know that? How could she possibly know that? The application has already been submitted, Eleanor said, and accepted, but I'd like to do more than that. Third page. A full academic scholarship through the Crestview Youth Foundation. Private school, starting next semester. Tuition, books, uniforms, extracurricular fees. Everything covered. Eleanor's voice softened, just slightly, just enough. Your brother stayed awake reading a marine biology textbook, Whitney. He was sleeping on it when I sat at your table. A boy like that deserves access to a marine biology lab, not just a library book he's already read 3 times. Calvin's lip trembled. He looked down at the table, then at his sneakers, the gray ones, the ones with duct tape on the sole. He didn't say anything. He couldn't. Whitney stared at the folder. 3 pages. 3 doors that had been locked her entire life, swinging open all at once. She didn't scream. She didn't jump up. She sat perfectly still, hands flat on the conference table, and tears rolled down her face in silence, one after another. She didn't wipe them. Calvin watched his sister. He had never seen her cry. Not when their mother died, not when the bills piled up, not once. He reached over and put his hand on top of hers. Eleanor let the silence breathe. Then she said one more thing. I don't want you to thank me, Whitney. I want you to do something. When you're in a position to help someone who reminds you of yourself, you do it. That's the deal. That's the only deal I'll ever ask of you. Whitney nodded. Slowly. She found her voice. It was small, but it was certain. Yes, ma'am. Gerald reached into the folder one last time. He pulled out a small envelope and slid it across the table to Calvin. Inside, a gift card for a shoe store, and a handwritten note written with Gerald's help in Eleanor's name. For Calvin's sneakers. No more duct tape. Calvin picked up the note, read it again, looked down at his shoes, then looked at Eleanor, a woman who couldn't see him, who had never seen him, but who had noticed him more than almost anyone in his life. He whispered 2 words. She noticed. But Whitney's story didn't end with her. It was just beginning to reach the people around her. Whitney started at the Ridgeview Culinary Institute 3 weeks later. First day, new kitchen, real equipment, ovens that worked, knives that were sharp, ingredients she'd only ever read about. She stood at her station in a white chef's coat with her name stitched on the chest and had to press her hands flat on the counter for a full minute just to stop them from shaking. She wasn't shaking from fear. She was shaking because this was real. She was the first one to arrive every morning, the last one to leave every night. She asked more questions than anyone in her cohort. She practiced techniques on her own time, plating, sauces, knife work, until her hands moved from memory. Her instructors noticed. One of them pulled her aside after the second month and said, "You don't cook like a student. You cook like someone who's been doing this her whole life." She had been. She just never had the kitchen to prove it. She graduated near the top of her class. Not at the very top. She'd be the first to tell you that. But close. Close enough. And the day after graduation, she made a phone call. Not to Eleanor, not to Gerald. To Hank Davis. "Hank, I have an idea." Whitney didn't buy the Sunnyside Diner. She partnered with Hank, 50-50. His name stayed on the door. His recipe stayed on the menu, next to hers. She used the Crestview Seed Grant to renovate the kitchen, new equipment, a real ventilation system, a walk-in cooler that didn't sound like it was dying. She redesigned the menu, kept the classics, added new dishes. Dishes her mother would have loved. Dishes Eleanor would recognize. Hank stood in the middle of the new kitchen on reopening day, thick hands on his hips, gray stubble, eyes wet. He didn't say much. He never did. He just looked at Whitney, nodded once, and said, "Your mama would be proud, kid." The diner reopened to a line around the block, not because of the limousine story, not because of Crestview Capital, because the food was good, really good. Word spread the way it always does in a neighborhood, one plate at a time, one conversation at a time. Local news picked it up. A reporter came by, did a 5-minute segment. The headline read, "From line cook to co-owner, how one woman's kindness changed a neighborhood." Whitney didn't love the attention, but she did the interview. For Hank, for the diner, for the block. Calvin thrived. New school, new sneakers, real ones, no duct tape. Access to a science lab with actual equipment, not just a library book and a broken notebook. He entered a regional science fair with a project on coral reef restoration. Spent 3 weeks building a model ecosystem in a tank he assembled himself. He placed second. A reporter asked him how it felt. Calvin shrugged, the same shrug his sister always did, and said, "My sister always told me we were going to be okay. I just didn't know she was right." But Whitney didn't stop at the diner. She went to Eleanor with another idea. The community center on Oak Street, the one where Pastor Raymond Brooks ran his tutoring program, was falling apart. Leaking roof, no heating, computers from 10 years ago. Kids deserved better. The Crestview Foundation funded a full renovation, new roof, new heating system, new computers, a proper library, and a kitchen, A real kitchen, where Whitney taught free cooking classes every Saturday morning, open to any kid in the neighborhood. No application, no fee, just show up. Miss Lorraine sat in the front row of the first class, arms crossed, smiling so wide her cheeks hurt. And then came the scholarship. Whitney and Eleanor created it together. The Ingram Moore Community Kitchen Scholarship, an annual grant for young people from underserved neighborhoods pursuing careers in culinary arts or food science. First year, 4 recipients. Second year, 8. By year 3, 12. Applications came from across the state. A food magazine ran a profile on Whitney. The headline, "She fed a stranger her last meal. Now she feeds hundreds." The article included a photo of Whitney and Eleanor at the scholarship ceremony. Eleanor was holding Whitney's hand. Both of them were laughing. Two women who met in a rainstorm. One who had everything, one who had nothing. Connected by a bowl of soup and a choice that cost Whitney nothing but courage. One meal, one stranger, one decision. It became a diner, a scholarship, a community center, a tradition. One act of kindness, multiplied. 1 year later, on a rainy night, Whitney found herself standing at a very familiar bus stop. It was a Tuesday, late, past 9. Whitney was walking home from the community center. She'd just finished teaching her Saturday overflow cooking class that had gotten so popular they added a weeknight session. The rain started halfway home. Not as bad as that night, but steady, cold, the kind that finds its way through your collar no matter how tight you pull your jacket. She had a jacket now, a good one. She turned onto Ridgeline Avenue, past the Crestview building, its lights still glowing on the top floor. Eleanor worked late most nights. Whitney knew that now. They spoke on the phone every Sunday, sometimes about business, sometimes about nothing. Sometimes Eleanor just wanted to hear how Calvin was doing. Whitney passed the bus stop, and she stopped. Someone was sitting there. A young woman, early 20s, hoodie soaked through, head down, a duffel bag clutched against her chest like it was everything she owned. Maybe it was. She was alone. She looked exhausted. She looked like she'd been sitting there for a while. People walked past. A man with an umbrella, a couple in matching rain jackets, a teenager with headphones who didn't even glance over. Nobody stopped. Whitney stood on the sidewalk for a moment, rain on her face. The memory hit her like a wave. Not a memory of what happened, but a memory of how it felt. The cold, the hesitation, the choice. She walked over and sat down on the bench, right next to the young woman. "Hey, you okay?" The young woman looked up, red eyes, tired face, surprised that anyone was talking to her. "I missed my bus. I don't really know where I'm going." Whitney nodded slowly. "That's all right. I've been there." She reached into her bag. She'd packed leftovers from the class, containers of soup, fresh bread, still warm. She always packed extra now. Always. She held a container out to the young woman. "Eat something first, then we'll figure out the rest." The young woman took it, opened it. The steam rose between them. She ate in silence. After a few bites, she looked at Whitney. "Why'd you stop? Nobody else did." Whitney looked across the street. The Crestview building, the silver crest glowing softly through the rain. Eleanor's office, the window that looked down at this very bench. She thought about a rainy night 1 year ago, a blind woman, a bowl of soup, a choice that changed everything. She smiled. "Somebody stopped for me once. That's all it takes. Just once." They sat together at the bus stop, two strangers sharing a meal in the rain. The same spot, a different story. The same kindness, passed forward, full circle. Whitney Ingram had nothing the night she stopped at that bus stop. 2 jobs, an empty fridge, a little brother waiting at home for dinner. She had every reason to keep walking. She stopped anyway. Not for a reward, not for a camera, not because she knew who Eleanor Moore was. She just saw someone who needed help, and she couldn't walk past. One jacket, one bowl of soup, one decision. It became a scholarship, a restaurant, a community center, a tradition of kindness passed from one stranger to the next. Sometimes that's all it takes. One person choosing to stop when everyone else keeps walking. If this story made you feel something, hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it today, and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I'll see y'all in the next one.
Okay, real talk. When was the last time you helped someone even though you were the one who needed help? Not when it was easy, not when you had extra, not when you had nothing, you still give. That's rare, because most of us wait. We tell ourselves, I will help when I'm stable, I will give when I have enough, I will be generous when my life is together. But that day never comes. There's always a reason to keep working, always a bill to pay, always something that makes not the right time. But here's what I believe. You don't need to have a lot to give a lot. A jacket is a jacket. A bowl of soap is a bowl of soap. It doesn't matter if it's the last one. What matters is that you give it. And sometimes the help that costs you the most is the help that means the most to them. And you never know what one small act of kindness can become. You just don't. You might think it's just a soup, but to someone else it's everything. So stop waiting until you have enough to start being good. Start now with whatever you've got, even if you're lost. Like, share and subscribe. Real story, real justice every week. And remember, you don't need to be rich to change someone's life. You just need to stop working.